The crystalline mediator's form caught the light as she began to speak. Her voice carried through the hall with perfect clarity, each word measured and deliberate. The Galactic Council has reviewed all evidence presented during this summit. We have examined the incident at Kepler Station from every angle. We have listened to testimony from both parties and considered the broader implications for galactic society. Jake's heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. He forced himself to keep breathing, to stay calm. Beside him, Lisa sat perfectly still, her professional mask firmly in place. This case has proven more complex than initially appeared. What seemed to be a clear instance of unprovoked violence has revealed deeper issues regarding cross-species communication and the challenges of integrating new species into the galactic community. The mediator paused, her crystalline form shifting colors slightly. Jake Morrison, you attacked Thekrex with intent to harm. You caused significant injury and trauma. Under normal circumstances, such actions would carry severe penalties, including possible execution under Vrax law. Jake felt his stomach drop. Here it came, the death sentence he had been expecting all along. However, the Council recognizes that your actions, while inexcusable, occurred under extraordinary circumstances. Evidence suggests you were subjected to chemical manipulation that triggered a fear response beyond your control. While this does not absolve you of responsibility, it provides important context. The mediator turned to Thekrex. The Vrax Collective has long operated under the assumption that chemical communication is a neutral tool of trade. This summit has revealed that what seems natural to your species can be experienced as an attack by others. This pattern of behavior, while not officially sanctioned, has been too widespread to ignore. Thekrex's breathing device hissed softly, but he remained silent. The Council has therefore decided on an unprecedented course of action. Rather than punishment, we are imposing mutual service. Jake Morrison, you are sentenced to 5 years of diplomatic service, specifically working on human-alien cultural exchange programs. You will use your experience to help prevent future conflicts. Jake felt dizzy. Not execution. Not prison. Service. Thekrex, you are also sentenced to 5 years of service. You will work to educate Vrax merchants about the psychological effects of pheromone manipulation on other species, and help develop new ethical trading standards. The crowd erupted in discussion. Some seemed pleased with the decision, others outraged. The mediator called for silence. Furthermore, the Galactic Council officially adopts the framework proposed by Jake Morrison and Thekrex as the foundation for new guidelines on cross-species trade relations. This framework will be expanded and refined over the coming months, with input from all member species. Lisa grabbed Jake's hand and squeezed it. Kenneth was smiling broadly. Across the table, Shkara was making complex gestures at Thekrex that seemed celebratory. This summit has demonstrated something crucial, the mediator continued. Violence can arise not from malice, but from misunderstanding. Fear can drive good beings to terrible actions, and most importantly, even those who have hurt each other can find common ground if they are willing to see each other as individuals rather than enemies. She looked directly at Jake and Thekrex. You two have shown the galaxy what is possible when we choose understanding over vengeance. Your willingness to work together despite your painful history has created a template for conflict resolution that will benefit countless beings. The mediator's form chimed one final time. This summit is concluded. May all species learn from what has transpired here. As the hall emptied, Jake sat down heavily in his chair. 5 years of diplomatic service. He would not die. He would not spend his life in prison. Instead, he would work to prevent others from experiencing what he and Thekrex had gone through. Thekrex approached the table slowly. It seems we are to be colleagues now. Jake laughed, a sound that was half relief and half disbelief. I guess so. Any idea what diplomatic service actually involves? None whatsoever, but I suspect we will learn together. Over the next few days, details of their assignments were worked out. Jake would be based at the Diplomatic Corps headquarters on Earth's moon, working with teams that helped prepare humans for life among alien species. He would travel frequently to various stations and colonies, teaching conflict resolution and cultural awareness. Thekrex would return to Vrax space initially, but would also travel extensively, meeting with merchant guilds and trade associations. The two of them would work together periodically, presenting joint seminars on their experience. Lisa would be Jake's supervisor, a fact that relieved him considerably. At least he would have someone he trusted guiding him through this new life. On the final evening before leaving Meridian 7, a farewell gathering was held in the gardens. Delegates from dozens of species came to speak with Jake and Thecrex, many sharing their own stories of cross-species misunderstandings. A Centaurian diplomat told Jake about the time she had accidentally insulted an entire planetary government by using the wrong greeting gesture. A being from the Silicon Collective described how his species had nearly gone to war over a trade dispute that turned out to be based on a translation error. The stories were funny, tragic, and deeply human in their demonstration that everyone, regardless of species, struggled with communication and understanding. Kenneth found Jake near the fountain and handed him a drink. "How are you feeling?" "Overwhelmed, grateful, terrified, all of it at once, and that's normal. You're about to start a career you never trained for, never wanted, and are completely unprepared for. But you'll be good at it, Jake. You have something that can't be taught in any diplomatic academy." "What's that?" "Authenticity. You're genuine. When you speak, people believe you, because you believe what you're saying. That's rare in diplomacy, and it's valuable." Jake watched the other delegates mingling in the garden. "Do you think this will actually change anything? Or will everyone forget about it in a few months?" "Some will forget," Kenneth admitted. "But others will remember, and those who remember will spread what they learned. Change doesn't happen all at once, Jake. It happens slowly, one conversation at a time, one relationship at a time. You and Thecrex started something here. Where it goes depends on how many others are willing to carry it forward." Shkara approached with Thecrex. The young Vrax had been appointed to the oversight committee that would implement the new trade framework. Her defiance of her elders during the summit had earned her considerable respect among younger Vrax. "I wanted to thank you both," she said. "What you did here gave many of us the courage to speak up about practices we knew were wrong. The Vrax Collective is beginning real reforms. It will take time, but change is coming." Thecrex made a gesture that Jake had learned meant pride. "You were braver than I was, Shkara. You spoke truth when I remained silent." "We all found our courage at different times," she replied. "That's enough." 6 months later, Jake stood in a classroom at the Diplomatic Corps facility on Luna. 20 young humans sat before him, all preparing for their first assignments to alien worlds. They looked eager and nervous, exactly as he had felt before his first cargo runs to alien stations. "My name is Jake Morrison," he began. "Some of you might recognize me from the news. 6 months ago, I strangled an alien merchant at Kepler Station. Today I'm going to tell you how that terrible moment taught me more about diplomacy than any textbook ever could." The students leaned forward, engaged and curious. Jake smiled and continued. "The first thing you need to understand about working with alien species is that violence is almost never the answer. I say almost because I want to be honest with you. There are situations where you might have to defend yourself, but 99 times out of 100, the violent option is the wrong option." He spent the next hour describing his experience, holding nothing back. He talked about the fear, the loss of control, the moment when he realized what he had done. He described sitting across from Thecrex and seeing the alien not as an enemy, but as another being who was scared and hurt. "The hardest part of diplomacy," Jake said, "is remembering that the being across from you, no matter how alien they look or act, has their own fears and hopes and pain. They're not just representatives of their species, they're individuals. And if you can connect with them on that level, you can solve almost any problem." After class, a young woman named Claire approached him. "Mr. Morrison, I'm assigned to a trading post that has a lot of Vrax merchants. Do you have any specific advice?" Jake thought for a moment. "Learn to recognize when you're being chemically manipulated. The new protocols require Vrax to announce when they're releasing strong pheromones, but some old traders still forget. If you suddenly feel intense emotion that doesn't match the situation, step back. Take a break. Don't make decisions when your biology is being hijacked. And if they do it deliberately, report it immediately. That's a violation of the new trade agreements and will be taken seriously. But remember, most Vrax aren't trying to hurt you. Chemical communication is so natural to them that they don't always realize they're doing it. Give them the benefit of the doubt when you can." Claire nodded and thanked him. As she left, Lisa appeared in the doorway. "How did it go?" "Better than I expected." The summit hall was packed beyond capacity. Delegates who had left earlier in the week had returned when word spread that Jake and Thecrex were making a joint statement. Cameras floated everywhere, recording from every angle. This moment would be broadcast across the galaxy. Jake stood at the central table with Thuckerex beside him. His hands were sweating and his heart hammered in his chest. Public speaking had never been his strength, and now he was about to address billions of beings across hundreds of worlds. Lisa caught his eye from where she sat with Kenneth. She gave him a small nod of encouragement. He took a deep breath and began. My name is Jake Morrison. I'm a cargo pilot from Earth. 15 days ago, I attacked a Vrax merchant named Thuckerex at Kepler Station. I wrapped my hands around his throat and nearly killed him. That is a fact no one can deny, and I take full responsibility for my actions. He paused, letting those words settle over the crowd. No excuses, no justifications, just the plain truth. But I want to tell you what I've learned since that day. I've learned that understanding is more important than being right. I've learned that two things can be true at the same time. I was provoked by chemical signals I couldn't control, and I still chose to use violence. Thuckerex suffered terrible injuries because of me, and he also benefited from trade practices that some consider exploitative. Jake gestured to the alien beside him. Over the past few days, Thuckerex and I have spent many hours talking. Not as a human and a Vrax, not as attacker and victim, but as two individuals trying to understand what happened between us. And what we discovered is that our conflict was never really about us. It was about fear. Thuckerex stepped forward then, his breathing device clicking softly. When he spoke, his translator carried his words clearly through the hall. I feared this human when he attacked me. I feared for my life and for my future. But I have learned that Jake Morrison also feared me that day. Not because I threatened him physically, but because something in our interaction triggered a response in his mind that he could not control. The alien's posture shifted in a way Jake had learned meant sincerity. I have spent my life as a trader, using every advantage my biology gives me to secure the best deals. I never considered that what seemed natural to me might feel like an attack to species without our chemical communication abilities. I never thought about how my pheromones might affect mammalian nervous systems. Jake took over again. What happened at Kepler Station should never have happened. But now that it has, we have a choice. We can let it drive our species apart, or we can use it to build something better. He pulled out a datapad and held it up. Thuckerex and I, with the help of our delegations, have drafted a framework for improved human-Vrax relations. It includes protocols for chemical communication in mixed species environments, transparent, pricing structures for trade, and joint oversight committees to handle disputes before they escalate to violence, Thuckerex continued. This framework acknowledges that humans and Vrax are fundamentally different in how we communicate and interact. Rather than expecting one species to simply adapt to the other, it creates systems where both species can work together safely and fairly. Jake looked out at the thousands of faces watching them. Some were skeptical, others curious, many just waiting to see where this would lead. I'm not a diplomat, Jake said. I'm not trained in negotiation or conflict resolution. I'm just a pilot who made a terrible mistake and is trying to make it right. But I think that's exactly why this matters. If someone like me can sit down with someone like Thuckerex and find common ground, then maybe there's hope for all of us. Thuckerex's plates shifted. Jake Morrison gave me these scars. I will carry them for the rest of my life. Every time I look at them, I will remember the feeling of dying. But I will also remember that the being who caused them spent weeks trying to understand me, trying to see past the surface to who I really am. That is not the action of a monster. That is the action of someone who genuinely wants peace. Jake felt emotion welling up in his chest. He had not expected Thuckerex to say that, had not expected such generosity from someone he had hurt so badly. The Galactic Council asked us to participate in this summit to show that conflicts can be resolved through understanding. I don't know if we've succeeded in that goal. But I do know that I understand Vrax culture better now than I did 3 weeks ago. And I know that Thuckerex understands human psychology better than most of his species. Thuckerex spoke again. We are not asking the Council to declare one of us right and the other wrong. We are asking for something more difficult. We are asking for recognition that this situation was complex, that both species contributed to it, and that both species must change their behaviors to prevent future incidents. Jake held up the datapad again. This framework is not perfect. It's just a starting point. But it represents hundreds of hours of work by humans and Vracs working together. It represents a commitment to doing better. The hall was completely silent now. Jake could feel the weight of all those eyes on him, all those beings waiting to hear what came next. The Galactic Council will decide what happens to me. I accept whatever judgment they make, but regardless of my personal fate, I hope they will consider this framework seriously, not because I created it, but because it represents a genuine attempt by two species to bridge their differences. Thakrex made a gesture with his front limbs that Jake had learned was a sign of respect. I came to this summit wanting justice, wanting the human who attacked me to be punished. But I leave it wanting something different. I want our species to learn from what happened. I want other beings to avoid the pain we both experienced. Jake and Thakrex stood together for a moment, letting their words sink in. Then they bowed to the mediator and returned to their seats. The hall erupted. Some delegates applauded, others immediately began debating what they had heard. The crystalline mediator had to call for order 3 times before the noise died down enough for her to speak. This summit will recess for 3 days while the Galactic Council reviews the proposed framework and determines the appropriate response to the incident at Kepler Station. We will reconvene on the 18th day for the final judgment. As the hall emptied, Lisa came over to Jake and pulled him into a quick hug. That was incredible. You both were incredible. Kenneth shook Jake's hand firmly. You may not think you're a diplomat, Mr. Morrison, but you just delivered one of the finest statements I've heard in 30 years of service. Shkara approached Thakrex, and the two Vracs engaged in a complex exchange of chemical signals that Jake could not interpret. But he could see that something had shifted in their dynamic. Shkara no longer seemed deferential to the older merchant. That evening, Jake found himself back in the gardens of Meridian 7. He was exhausted, emotionally drained from the day's events. He had said everything he needed to say, had done everything he could do. Now it was out of his hands. He was sitting by the floating water fountain when Thakrex appeared. The alien approached slowly, his breathing device reflecting the glow from the bioluminescent plants. May I sit with you? Thakrex asked. Of course. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching other delegates walk past in the evening light. Finally, Thakrex spoke. Whatever the council decides, I want you to know something. I forgive you for what you did to me. Not because I think it was justified, but because I understand you now. I understand that you are not defined by your worst moment. Jake felt tears on his cheeks. Thank you, that means more than you know. I also want to apologize. I did not deliberately attack you with pheromones, but I was careless. I treated you as a resource to be manipulated rather than as an equal to be respected. That was wrong. We both made mistakes, Jake said. The question is whether we can learn from them. Thakrex's eyes reflected the garden lights. I think we already have. Over the next 3 days, Jake tried to relax, but his mind kept returning to the upcoming judgment. Lisa assured him that the joint statement had gone well, that public opinion had shifted significantly. But there were still many who wanted him punished harshly. The Vracs delegation had split. The older delegates remained firm that Jake should face serious consequences, but Shkara and a growing number of younger Vracs supported the framework proposal. There were even calls within the Vracs collective to reform their trading practices across the board. On the morning of the 18th day, Jake dressed carefully in his best clothes and prepared to face whatever came next. He had done everything he could. He had been honest, had sought understanding, had worked with the Thakrex to create something positive from their conflict. If the council still decided to execute him, at least he would die knowing he had tried. Lisa met him outside his quarters. Ready? As I'll ever be. Kenneth joined them as they walked to the summit hall. Whatever happens today, Jake, you've already accomplished something remarkable. You've shown the galaxy that humans are capable of growth, of empathy, of choosing understanding over anger. That's a legacy worth having. As they entered the hall for the final time, Jake looked around at the thousands of beings gathered there. This moment would determine not just his fate, but potentially the future of human-Vracs relations for generations to come. The crystalline mediator stood at her podium, her form chiming softly. The second week of the summit brought unexpected changes. Lisa had worked through the night after Jake told her about his conversation with Shkara. By morning, she had compiled her own research on human Vrax trade incidents over the past 2 years. The pattern was undeniable once you knew to look for it. 17 documented cases of humans reacting violently during trade negotiations with Vrax merchants. In each case, the human reported sudden fear or panic before losing control. Most of the incidents had been quietly settled with fines and restrictions, never making the news. Kenneth presented this information to the summit on the 8th day. He projected the data for everyone to see, highlighting the similarities between incidents. The crowd reacted with interest, and several other species began to share their own experiences. A delegate from the Centaurian Alliance stood and described how Vrax merchants had used pheromone manipulation on their people decades ago. It had led to economic exploitation that lasted for years until the Centaurians developed chemical filters for their trading posts. Others came forward with similar stories. The Vrax were skilled traders, but some of them were not above using their natural abilities to gain advantages. It was not illegal under galactic law, but it existed in a gray area that many species found troubling. The older Vrax delegates looked uncomfortable as more evidence came to light. They insisted that such practices were not officially sanctioned, that individual merchants sometimes acted inappropriately, but that the Vrax collective as a whole did not support manipulation. Thikrex himself said nothing during these revelations. He sat at the table, his breathing device hissing softly, watching the proceedings with unreadable eyes. Jake felt conflicted. On one hand, this information supported his version of events. It showed that what had happened to him was part of a larger pattern. On the other hand, it did not change the fundamental fact that he had nearly killed another being. During a break in the proceedings, Lisa pulled Jake aside. "This is going better than expected. Public opinion is shifting. People are starting to see you as a victim rather than an aggressor." "But I'm not just a victim," Jake said. "I still did what I did. Thikrex still has scars because of me." "I know, and that's actually good. It shows you understand the complexity of the situation." "That's what diplomacy is about, Jake. Recognizing that multiple things can be true at the same time." That afternoon, something remarkable happened. A delegate from a species Jake had never encountered before requested to speak. They looked like living shadows, their forms constantly shifting and changing. Their translator gave their words a strange echoing quality. "We have observed this summit with great interest," the shadow being said. "We have seen blame assigned and evidence presented. But we have not yet seen what matters most. We have not seen true understanding between the two parties at the center of this conflict." The mediator tilted her crystalline head. "What do you suggest?" "Let them speak to each other directly, without diplomats, without mediators, without the galaxy watching. Give them space to be honest with each other, to see each other as individuals rather than representatives of their species." The crowd erupted in discussion. Some thought it was a brilliant idea. Others worried it could lead to more violence. The Vrax delegation conferred among themselves, their chemical signals invisible but clearly active. Finally, Thikrex stood. His breathing device clicked as he spoke. "I will agree to this. If the human is willing." All eyes turned to Jake, his heart was pounding. The idea of being alone in a room with Thikrex terrified him. Not because he feared the alien would hurt him, but because he would have to face what he had done without any buffer. "I'm willing," Jake said, his voice steadier than he felt. The mediator arranged for a small meeting room to be prepared. No cameras, no recording devices, no observers. Just two beings trying to understand each other. Jake entered the room first. It was simple, with two chairs facing each other and soft lighting that worked for both species. He sat down and waited, his hands clasped together to keep them from shaking. When Thikrex entered, Jake stood instinctively. The alien paused at the doorway, and for a moment neither of them moved. Then Thikrex came in and sat in the other chair. They sat in silence for a long time. Jake did not know how to start, what to say that could possibly bridge the gap between them. Thikrex seemed equally uncertain, his breathing device the only sound in the room. Finally, Jake spoke. "I don't know if you can understand this, but I need to tell you something. That day in the marketplace when I grabbed you, I wasn't thinking. My mind was filled with fear so intense I couldn't see anything else. But the moment I touched you, the fear vanished. And I saw what I was doing. I saw you struggling, heard the sound of your plates cracking, and I was horrified. But by then it was too late to undo it. The Crex was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I thought I was going to die. In my culture, we do not fear death the way some species do. But to die suddenly, violently, without time to prepare my chemical legacy for my offspring, that was terrifying. I have nightmares now. I wake up feeling hands around my throat even though you are not there. Jake felt tears building in his eyes. I'm so sorry. I know those words mean nothing compared to what you went through, but I don't know what else to say. Tell me why, the Crex said. Help me understand what made you do it. Was it hatred for my species? Anger at my prices? No, Jake said firmly. I've traded with dozens of Vrax merchants before you. I never had any problems. It was the fear. Something triggered a fear response so strong that my training took over. I was a soldier once, trained to react to threats instantly. When that fear hit me, my body moved before my mind could catch up. And you believe I caused this fear? I think something in the air did. Whether you meant to or not, I don't know. But I felt it and I reacted. Decrex's plates shifted in what might have been a sigh. I cannot remember releasing any distress pheromones that day. But I release hundreds of chemical signals without conscious thought, just as you make facial expressions without planning them. It is possible I sent something that your mind interpreted as danger. They sat in silence again. But it felt different now, less hostile, more thoughtful. What happens to you if this summit fails? Thecrex asked. I'll be executed under your laws. Molecular dissolution, I think they called it. That is a terrible way to die, even for someone who attacked me. Thecrex paused. What happens to me? I don't know. I haven't thought much about what you're facing. My reputation is destroyed. No one will trade with a Vrax who was bested by a human in physical combat. My family has been shamed. My offspring will carry the stigma of having a parent who was weak enough to be strangled. Jake had not considered this. He had been so focused on his own situation that he had not thought about how this incident had affected Thackerex beyond the physical injuries. So we're both trapped, Jake said. Both of us facing consequences we never wanted. Yes. And both of us being used as symbols by our species. I am the victim that proves humans are dangerous. You are the aggressor that proves Vrax manipulation exists. Neither of us asked for this role. Jake leaned forward. What if we refused to play those roles? What if we told our own story instead of letting others tell it for us? What do you mean? I mean, what if we admitted the truth? That this situation is complicated, that both of us made mistakes, that both of us suffered. What if we stood together and said we don't want this conflict to define our species' relationship? Thecrex's eyes reflected light and patterns Jake was learning to read. Curiosity, maybe, or hope. They would not listen to us. We are just a pilot and a merchant. Maybe that's exactly why they would listen. We're not politicians trying to score points. We're just two people who got caught up in something bigger than ourselves and are trying to find a way out. They talked for 2 more hours. Jake learned about Vrax culture, about how chemical communication shaped every aspect of their society. Thecrex learned about human fear responses, about how trauma could wire a mind to react violently to perceived threats. By the time they emerged from the room, something had changed. They were not friends, not yet. The wounds were too fresh for that. But they had seen each other as people rather than symbols, and that was a start. Lisa was waiting outside with Kenneth and Shkara. They looked surprised to see Jake and Thecrex walking out together talking quietly. We have an idea, Jake said, and we're going to need your help to make it work. Kenneth smiled. I'm listening. Over the next few days, Jake and Thecrex worked with their respective delegations to draft a proposal. It was not a simple apology or a declaration of innocence. It was something more honest and more difficult. They would acknowledge what had happened without trying to assign blame. They would describe their shared experience and what they had learned from it, and they would propose reforms to how human-Vrax trade relationships were conducted, including clear guidelines on chemical communication and protocols for handling conflicts. The other delegates were skeptical at first, but as they reviewed the proposal, many began to see its potential. This was not about winning or losing. It was about finding a better way forward. On the 15th day of the summit, Jake and Thecrex requested permission to make a joint statement. The mediator granted it, and the Meridian 7 was not like any place Jake had ever seen. The entire moon had been converted into a massive diplomatic facility, with buildings that seemed to grow out of the ground itself. Gardens filled with plants from 1,000 different worlds lined the pathways. The air was carefully controlled to be breathable for most species, though some delegates walked around in environmental suits. The transport landed on a platform near the main complex. As Jake stepped out, he felt hundreds of eyes on him. Cameras floated through the air, recording everything. Delegates from dozens of species stood on balconies and walkways, watching the human who had strangled an alien merchant arrive for his peace summit. Lisa walked beside him, her posture straight and professional. Behind them came Ambassador Kenneth Wright, Earth's senior diplomat. He was an older man with gray hair and a kind face that hid a sharp mind. Jake had met him briefly on the transport, and the ambassador had been surprisingly gentle in his advice. "Remember," Kenneth said quietly as they walked, "this is theater as much as diplomacy. The galaxy is watching to see if humans can handle conflict with grace. Show them we can." The summit hall was enormous. It could hold thousands of beings, and from the looks of it, thousands had come. The ceiling stretched up at least 50 meters, covered in some kind of crystal that reflected light in beautiful patterns. Seating surrounded a central circular table where the actual negotiations would take place. Jake felt his heart pounding as they entered. This was real. This was actually happening. In a few minutes, he would be sitting across from Thekrex, the alien he had nearly killed, trying to explain his actions to the entire galaxy. The circular table had 6 chairs, 3 for the human delegation, 3 for the Vrax. Jake sat in the middle with Lisa on his right and Kenneth on his left. Across from them, the Vrax delegation was already seated. Thekrex sat directly across from Jake. The alien wore some kind of breathing device around his damaged throat, a clear tube that helped him get air. Even from across the table, Jake could see the scars on the chitinous plates, the places where his grip had cracked the alien's natural armor. Their eyes met, and Jake felt a wave of shame wash over him. Whatever had happened that day, whatever provocation had occurred, he had done this damage. He had caused this pain. The other 2 Vrax delegates were older, their plates darker and more worn. One was male, the other female, though Jake had difficulty telling the difference. Lisa had told him their names, but he had trouble pronouncing them even in his mind. A being from the Crystalline Collective stood at a podium near the table. She was the summit mediator, chosen because her species had no conflicts with either humans or Vrax. Her body was made of some kind of living crystal that chimed softly when she moved. "This summit is now convened," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "We gather here to witness an attempt at understanding between 2 species. The incident at Kepler Station has been seen by billions. Today we will hear both sides and seek a path to peace. The first day was brutal." The mediator invited Thekrex to speak first, to describe the incident from his perspective. The alien stood slowly, his breathing device hissing softly. When he spoke, his words were translated into dozens of languages simultaneously. Jake heard the English version through his earpiece, but he could also hear the original Vrax clicking and whistling. Thekrex described the attack in detail. He talked about how he had been conducting normal business when the human suddenly lunged at him. He described the feeling of hands around his throat, the terror of not being able to breathe, the certainty that he was about to die. He showed the crowd images of his injuries, close-up projections that appeared in the air above the table. The crowd reacted with gasps and murmurs. Jake wanted to look away, but Lisa's hand on his arm kept him focused forward. He had to watch this. He had to face what he had done. Thekrex spoke for nearly an hour. By the end, many in the crowd were clearly angry. Jake could see it in their body language, hear it in their voices. He was the villain here, the violent human who had attacked a peaceful merchant. When Thekrex finally sat down, the mediator turned to Jake. "The human delegation may now respond." Jake stood on shaking legs. His mouth was dry and his mind was blank. All the preparation, all the practice with Lisa, seemed to evaporate in the face of those thousands of watching eyes. He looked at his notes, but the words blurred together. Then he looked up at Thekrex, at those alien eyes watching him, and something inside him shifted. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I know that doesn't change what happened. I know it doesn't heal your injuries or take away your fear, but I need you to know that I am deeply, truly sorry for what I did to you." The crowd was silent, Lisa nodded slightly, encouraging him to continue. I've been a cargo pilot for 6 years, Jake went on. I've traveled to dozens of stations, traded with hundreds of different species. I've never attacked anyone before. I've never even come close. But that day, something happened to me. He described the fear, how it had come on so suddenly and so intensely that it overrode his rational mind. He explained his military training, how he had been taught to react to threats without thinking. He talked about the moment when he realized what he was doing, when the fear vanished and horror took its place. I'm not trying to excuse my actions, Jake said. I'm responsible for what I did, regardless of what triggered it. But I want you all to understand that this wasn't just random violence. Something pushed me to that point. He sat down, his hands trembling. Lisa leaned over and whispered, "Well done." But the Vrax delegates were not satisfied. The older male stood and addressed the crowd. The human speaks of provocation, of fear that was not his own. But we have investigated these claims. There is no proof that any pheromones were deliberately released. The marketplace has many beings, many sources of chemical signals. This human simply lost control and tried to kill one of our people. The crowd murmured in agreement. Kenneth stood to respond, his voice calm and measured. We are not claiming that the Vrax deliberately attacked Jake Morrison. We are simply stating that a series of unfortunate circumstances led to a tragic incident. Both parties suffered. Both parties deserve consideration. The debate went on for hours. Arguments flew back and forth across the table, with neither side willing to concede ground. By the time the mediator called for a recess, Jake felt exhausted. As they left the hall, Lisa pulled him aside. You did well in there. Speaking from the heart was the right choice. It doesn't feel like it helped, Jake said. Everyone still thinks I'm just a violent thug. Give it time. This is only the first day. We have weeks ahead of us. That night, Jake could not sleep. He kept replaying the day in his mind, kept seeing Thukrex's injuries projected in the air. He had done that. No matter what else was true, that fact remained. He walked through the gardens of Meridian 7, trying to clear his head. The paths were lit by bioluminescent plants that glowed softly in the darkness. Other delegates walked past him, some nodding in greeting, others deliberately looking away. Near a fountain made of floating water spheres, he found a quiet bench and sat down. He was so lost in thought that he did not notice the figure approaching until she spoke. Mr. Morrison? He looked up to see one of the Vrax delegates, the younger female. She stood a few meters away, her body language suggesting uncertainty. I am Shkara, she said through her translator. I wanted to speak with you privately, away from the others. Jake stood slowly. All right. What about? Shkara looked around as if checking to make sure they were alone. Then she stepped closer. I believe you. About the fear. About the pheromones. I think something did happen to you that day. Jake felt his heart skip a beat. Why would you believe me? Your people seem convinced I'm lying. Because, Shkara said quietly, I have been reviewing trade records. Thukrex is not the only Vrax merchant who has been involved in incidents with humans. There have been others, smaller conflicts that never made the news, and in each case the human reported feeling sudden, unexplained fear before reacting violently. You think it's a pattern? I think some of our merchants have been testing your species, seeing how you react under chemical stress. It is not something our government approves of, but some traders operate outside official guidelines. Jake felt anger rising in his chest, but he forced it down. If that's true, why not speak up at the summit?
Tell everyone what you found?
Shkara's posture shifted in what might have been the Vrax equivalent of a shrug. Because I have no proof. Only suspicions and patterns that could be coincidence. If I speak without evidence, I will be dismissed as young and foolish. But I wanted you to know that not all Vrax believe you are simply a monster. She turned to leave, then paused. Thukrex is scared of you, Mr. Morrison. He hides it well, but I can read his chemical signals. He nearly died, and that fear has not left him. Perhaps if you could find a way to acknowledge his suffering, really acknowledge it, things might change. Then she was gone, disappearing into the darkness of the garden. Jake sat back down on the bench, his mind racing. There might be hope here after all. 3 days passed in the holding cell before anyone came to see Jake. He spent the time thinking about his life, about the choices that had led him to this moment. He had joined the military young, served 4 years, then left to become a cargo pilot. It had been a simple life, a good life. Now it was over. The woman who finally arrived wore the dark blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. She was in her late 30s, with short blonde hair and sharp green eyes that studied Jake carefully. Her name tag read Hayes, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had spent years negotiating with aliens. She sat down on the bench across from Jake and looked at him for a long moment without speaking. Finally, she sighed and pulled out a data pad. "My name is Lisa Hayes," she said. "I'm a commander in the diplomatic corps and I've been assigned to your case." Jake nodded but said nothing. What was there to say? "You've created quite a mess, Mr. Morrison," Lisa continued. "The video of your attack has been viewed over 3 billion times across the galactic network. Every news service from here to the Andromeda Relay is talking about it. The Vrax Collective is demanding your execution. Human colonies are rallying behind you, claiming self-defense. The whole situation is about to explode into a diplomatic nightmare." "I didn't mean to cause trouble," Jake said quietly. "Something happened to me. I felt this overwhelming fear and then I just reacted." Lisa studied him carefully. "I believe you. We've been investigating the incident and we found traces of Vrax pheromones in the air around the marketplace stall. They're designed to induce panic responses in mammalian species. The problem is, we can't prove Threx released them intentionally. So I'm just supposed to take the blame for everything?" "That's where things get interesting," Lisa said, leaning forward. "The Galactic Council has made a proposal. They want to use your case as a test for their new conflict resolution program. Instead of a trial, they're offering something different. A peace summit." Jake stared at her. "A peace summit? For what?" "For you and Thacrex to work through this incident in front of the entire galaxy. You'd sit down with him, along with representatives from both our species, and try to reach an understanding. The goal is to show that even violent conflicts can be resolved through dialogue and mutual respect." "That's insane," Jake said. "I'm not a diplomat. I'm a cargo pilot who made a terrible mistake. How am I supposed to sit across from someone I nearly killed and have a conversation about understanding?" Lisa's expression hardened. "You don't have a choice, Mr. Morrison. If you refuse this summit, you'll be tried under Vrax law. Their legal system doesn't recognize provocation as a defense for physical assault. The mandatory sentence is death by molecular dissolution. It takes about 6 hours, and from what I understand, it's not pleasant." Jake felt his stomach turn. "So either I become some kind of poster boy for galactic peace or I die." "That's the situation, yes." He stood up and paced the small cell. This was impossible. How could they expect him to do this? He had no training in diplomacy. He barely understood alien cultures. The whole thing seemed designed to fail. "Why me?" he asked. "Why is this so important?" Lisa stood as well, her voice softening slightly. "Because humanity is at a crossroads, Jake. We've been part of the galactic community for less than 20 years. We're still the new kids, still trying to prove we belong. Some species think we're too violent, too primitive. Others think we have potential. This summit will help determine which view prevails. And if I mess it up, then every human colony, every human trader, every human diplomat will pay the price. We'll be isolated, cut off from trade routes, excluded from councils. We'll be treated as second-class citizens for generations." Jake sat back down, his head spinning. "No pressure, right?" "I'll be with you every step of the way," Lisa said. "We have 2 weeks before the summit begins. I'll teach you everything you need to know about diplomacy, about Vrax culture, about how to control your emotions in high-stress situations. You're not going into this alone. 2 weeks to become a diplomat. That's not much time. It's what we have. The Galactic Council wants this resolved quickly, before tensions escalate further. The Vrax are already restricting human access to certain trade routes. If this continues, it could lead to an economic blockade, maybe worse." Jake looked at Lisa, really looked at her. He saw the worry in her eyes despite her professional demeanor. She believed in this, believed it was important, maybe even believed in him, though he could not imagine why. "What if I agree to this summit and still fail?" he asked. "What if Thicrex won't forgive me? What if we can't reach an understanding? Then at least we tried. At least the galaxy will see that humans are willing to face their mistakes, willing to seek peace even when it's difficult. That counts for something." Jake thought about Thacrex lying on the marketplace floor, thought about the fear that had gripped him so suddenly. Someone had manipulated him, pushed him into violence. But regardless of the provocation, he had made a choice. He had wrapped his hands around another being's throat and squeezed until he heard bones crack. That was on him, no one else. "All right," he said finally. "I'll do it. I'll go to this summit and try to make peace with Thecrex. But I'm telling you right now, I don't know if I can pull this off. Lisa smiled for the first time since entering the cell. That's all anyone can ask. We'll start tomorrow morning. I've arranged for you to be moved to better quarters. You'll have access to educational materials, cultural databases, everything you need to prepare. She stood and walked to the cell door, then paused. Jake, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about you anymore. Every human who wants to trade, explore, or live in peace among the stars is counting on you. I know that's unfair. I know you never asked for this responsibility, but life rarely gives us the burdens we're prepared to carry. After she left, Jake sat alone in the cell and thought about what she had said. He had woken up 3 days ago as a simple cargo pilot with money troubles. Now he was supposed to become some kind of ambassador for his entire species. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. Over the next 2 weeks, Lisa worked with Jake every day. She taught him about Vrax culture, about their complex social hierarchies and their reliance on chemical communication. She explained how pheromones were as natural to them as spoken language was to humans, and how easy it was for misunderstandings to occur. She taught him breathing exercises to control his anger and his fear. She showed him how to read alien body language, how to listen not just to words but to the meaning behind them. She drilled him on diplomatic protocols until he could recite them in his sleep. But most importantly, she taught him to see Threx not as an enemy, but as another being who had also suffered from their encounter. The alien had nearly died. His throat would carry scars for the rest of his life. He had his own trauma to deal with, his own fears. By the time they boarded the transport to Meridian 7, the neutral moon where the summit would be held, Jake felt slightly more prepared. Not confident, but prepared. He understood what was at stake now. Understood that his actions over the next few weeks would shape humanity's future among the stars. As the transport lifted off from Kepler Station, Jake looked out the window at the stars and wondered if he was strong enough for what came next. He supposed he was about to find out. Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he walked through the crowded marketplace of Kepler Station. The air was thick with the smell of alien spices and the sound of 100 different languages mixing together. He had been flying cargo ships for 6 years now, and Kepler Station was just another stop on his route. Nothing special, nothing exciting, just another place to refuel and resupply before heading back out into the black. His ship, the Frontier Spirit, was docked at Bay 17. It was old, reliable, and had kept him alive through asteroid fields and solar storms. Jake liked it that way. No fancy technology to break down, no complicated systems to fail when you needed them most. Just a good, solid ship that did what it was supposed to do. He needed fuel cells, the expensive kind that lasted longer than the cheap alternatives. His next run was going to take him past 3 solar systems, and he could not afford to run out of power halfway there. The problem was that fuel cells cost money, and Jake had been scraping by for months. Every credit counted. The Vrax merchant stood behind a counter made of some kind of blue metal. His name was Threx, according to the translator chip in Jake's ear. The alien looked like a giant insect, with compound eyes that reflected light in strange patterns and mouth parts that clicked together when he spoke. His body was covered in hard plates that shimmered green and black. Jake had dealt with Vrax before. They were traders, always looking for the best deal, always trying to squeeze a few extra credits out of whoever walked up to their stalls. He knew how to negotiate with them. Be firm, be polite, and never show weakness. The price Threx quoted was ridiculous. 3 times what Jake had paid at the last station. He shook his head and offered half. The Vrax clicked his mouth parts in what might have been laughter. They went back and forth for several minutes, neither willing to budge. Then something changed. Jake felt his heart start to race. His hands began to shake, and a cold sweat broke out across his skin. Fear washed over him like a wave, sudden and overwhelming. He could not understand where it was coming from. There was no danger here, just a simple negotiation over fuel cells. But the fear grew stronger. His breathing became shallow, and his vision started to narrow at the edges. Something was very wrong. Jake's military training from years ago kicked in, screaming at him that he was under attack. His body went into survival mode. He looked at the Vrax merchant and saw something in those alien eyes. A satisfaction, a knowing look. The alien was doing this to him somehow, manipulating him, making him feel this terror. Jake did not think about what came next. His body moved on instinct. He lunged forward, grabbed Thickrex by what passed for a throat and squeezed. The alien's chitinous plates cracked under the pressure. Jake heard the sound clearly, like stepping on a beetle. The Vrax made a horrible whistling noise and tried to pull away, but Jake's grip was iron. The fear vanished from Jake's mind the moment he touched the alien. Clarity returned, but by then it was too late to stop. His hands were already wrapped around Thickrex's throat, and the alien was thrashing wildly. Security drones dropped from the ceiling like mechanical spiders. Their warning sirens filled the air, and red lights flashed everywhere. Jake released his grip and stepped back, his hands shaking again, but this time from the realization of what he had just done. Thickrex collapsed on the ground, gasping and making wet, gurgling sounds. Green fluid leaked from cracks in his throat plates. Other aliens in the marketplace were screaming and running away. The security drones surrounded Jake, their weapons pointed at him. He raised his hands slowly, showing he was not a threat anymore. His mind was racing. What had he done? Why had he attacked the merchant? The fear was gone now, completely gone, as if it had never existed. But the memory of it was fresh. Someone had done that to him. Something had invaded his mind and made him feel that way. The security drones ordered him to lie on the ground. Jake obeyed, pressing his face against the cold metal floor of the station. He could hear people gathering around, their voices a confused mix of anger and curiosity. Someone was yelling in a language he did not recognize. Someone else was crying. Medical drones arrived and started working on Thickrex. Jake could not see what they were doing, but he could hear the alien's labored breathing. He was still alive, at least. That was something. Jake had not killed him, but he had come close. Very close. The security drones lifted Jake to his feet and bound his hands behind his back with energy cuffs that hummed against his skin. They marched him through the marketplace, past dozens of staring faces. Some were human, most were alien. None of them looked friendly. He saw the recording devices. They were everywhere. Small flying cameras that belonged to news services and independent journalists. They had captured everything. The attack, the violence, all of it. Within hours, the whole galaxy would know what had happened here. A human had strangled an alien in broad daylight in front of witnesses for no apparent reason. It did not matter that Jake had been provoked. It did not matter that something had been done to his mind. All anyone would see was a violent human attacking a peaceful merchant. The security drones took him to a holding cell deep inside the station. The cell was small, maybe 3 meters by 3 meters, with walls made of transparent aluminum. He could see out into the corridor where guards walked past without looking at him. Jake sat on the hard bench and put his head in his hands. His career was over. His life was probably over too. Humans were still new to the galactic community, still trying to prove they belonged among the stars, and he had just given every alien species a reason to fear and distrust them. He thought about Thickrex lying on the marketplace floor, green blood leaking from his throat. He thought about the fear that had gripped him, so sudden and so intense that he had reacted without thinking. Someone had done that to him on purpose. He was sure of it now, but proving it would be impossible. And even if he could prove it, would anyone care? He had still nearly killed another sentient being. That was a fact no one could deny. Jake leaned back against the wall and closed his eyes. Whatever came next, he would face it. He had no other choice.